Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mumey and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
Everybody, welcome. It is Thursday, January 7th. We are back after a couple of weeks off during the holidays. Hope everyone is well and healthy and ready to get back to work and study. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Hi, I'm pretty well. How are you, Jackson?
Good. Let's go ahead and just get to the stuff that's happening, the news of the day, and then the questions that people have, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so first, just a few things that I wanted to talk about with the jurisdictions and what's happening. I know that if you're a California student, you already know this, but results will be released tomorrow, which is Friday. So that's exciting news because it's been moved up significantly from where they were initially thinking it was going to be closer to the end of January. So that's great news. I know with California, they said, if you do need to retake and you want to retake for February, you'll have 10 business days from the day that results are released to register for the February exam. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think the part that I want to just say to our students in particular is, if you felt like you were not successful, I know many of you have been studying in anticipation of, unfortunately, getting bad results. You'll be able to switch on right away with us and keep moving towards the February exam. Under our lifetime pass guarantee, there's nothing you have to do except to let us know that you did not pass. Sometimes people think that we've got that information from the bar examiners. We do not. They delay what they release to us by a significant number of days. So the only way we're going to know if you passed or failed is for you to report that to us. We're 45 days or so from the exam. Is that right, Megan? It's about right, 45 days?
Oh my goodness, is it really? Wow.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's all it is. So that means at about 250 hours of study, it means about 5 hours a day. So it is manageable. It can be done. Just bear in mind those time frames and be prepared. We're going to encourage you to try and sit for the February exam if you've been doing anything at all. Now, if you've been in a cold stop, it may be tough to get back up and do what you have to do to be ready for February. But the reason that we're promoting the February exam is we think a lot of people will, in fact, skip this test if they found out they didn't pass. And so I think there's an opportunity for repeat takers in California in that regard. Now, obviously, we've gotten some people that got results in Georgia and New York and New Jersey and some other jurisdictions right before the holidays. You should have had enough time to study. So I hope everybody's moving forward in that direction.
Great. I did, speaking of Georgia, I wanted to just let people know, because I know we've got some questions about that. Georgia released their pass rate, but they also released their repeater pass rate. So it was 29.9% for the October exam. Jackson, what is that, if anything, does that tell us?
It was slightly better than some other states, but that's still a pretty low repeat taker bar pass rate. What's interesting to me is how much better than that we did with our students. We've had an enormously successful Georgia season in October, and I am really attributing that primarily to two words: mind maps. I think mind maps made a huge difference. As I've talked to successful students who are repeat bar takers, it comes up over and over again. I used mind maps. I was prepared, whether they used them in the open book part of the exam or just were prepared for them. The mind maps made a big difference. And so the overall pass rate is, I think the question we ask ourselves is, did an open book test change the numbers? A little bit, but they offset by the longer questions. The feedback was that particularly Georgia essay number 3 was a bear. It had 7 calls of the question in it in 30 minutes. That's just rough. I think that's part of it.
Okay, and then one last note is about Texas. So Texas is the only large jurisdiction that is sticking with the in-person exam as opposed to moving to online for February. And I did want to point out that they just added a 4th testing site, which is going to be in Lubbock. So if you're planning on taking the Texas exam, it's still moving forward as an in-person exam. They did open another testing site. I like to at least believe that maybe it's to hope to spread people out a little bit more, but I don't really know what that looks like. Texas has a lot of examinees and only 4 cities where they're testing people.
Yeah, and I think the Texas bar exam will be one of the bigger ones because of the switch to UBE.
Yeah.
So here's the other thing. If you wanted to be barred in Texas, you don't have to take the exam in Texas. If you don't feel comfortable going to an in-person exam, you could take the UBE online somewhere else and waive your score into Texas as long as it hits the 270. So don't feel compelled to sit in Texas specifically. And I know that's always a big switch when we go from these states that are non-UBE when they switch to the UBE. You don't have to be in Texas to be a member of the Texas bar. You just need the score that they require from another UBE jurisdiction. And there's no worry here about reciprocity. This is score portability. Mm-hmm. So unless you're sitting for the exam in Florida or California or Georgia, you've got a pretty good shot of having your score transferred over into Texas. So that's, and I think conversely, if you wanted to take a bar exam in person, you certainly could do it in Texas, although there'll be some other UBE jurisdictions, I think, that offer in person. We're still, what is it, about half of the country is online? Does it look like for February?
Yeah, I think so. And we're getting pretty close to that date. So I think I wouldn't expect as much movement now for the next month.
Yeah, I agree. Let me just update everybody on a couple of things. Some of you may have heard of something called the Testing Task Force. This is a group that was formed by the National Conference of Bar Examiners to look at bar exam tests. Megan and I are going to do a breakdown of their latest report, and we will put that into a podcast, and we'll let you know about that. So just want to let you know, if you've been watching or at all aware of that on the periphery, we're going to be talking about that. We will obviously be talking about California bar results next week and dealing with that. I think the final thing that I would be remiss to not talk about the elephant in the room. What happened yesterday in Washington, D.C. was troubling to me personally. I know it was to you too as well, Megan. We don't talk about politics on this podcast. That's not our job. It's not what we're here to do. But I do want to say that in the midst of all of this, I am very proud of our students for continuing to stay focused on what matters, which is to pass the bar and to become members of their bar and to make an impact, regardless of their politics, to make an impact in their communities. That is your task right now. Now, there are other tasks that certainly all of us are involved with, not just social justice and issues, but health and safety and getting through the crazy world that we find ourselves in. It is difficult to study and stay focused. And there will be days, unfortunately, like yesterday, when everything comes off the rails. I've already heard from some people who are beating themselves up because they said, I lost a day of study.
Oh, no.
Don't do that to yourself. There are bigger issues out there, and it's okay to recognize that there are times that you just can't do. Your day just gets destroyed, and we want to give you permission to recognize those things, to do what you've got to do. Maybe you got to be with your kids. Maybe you've got to deal with a health issue or COVID issue. Maybe it's dealing with the craziness that's going on outside in the world. Do those things. Give them everything you've got at those moments. And then come back the next day and give yourself grace to start again, to try again, and to have a new day where you're studying and you give yourself an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and then go back into the world and come back. Please don't be down on yourselves or beat yourselves up. I think about this time of the year, I mean, coming out of Christmas, I think about It's a Wonderful Life and the angel gets their wings. In a sense, I feel like we get our wings every time one of you passes the bar exam and go out into the world. And I get to do these videos with so many people, and I get so excited about the impact that they're going to make. And most of these are folks that tried multiple times. I just did a bunch of interviews with people that failed 4, 5, 6 times before they passed. And they all say to a person, I wouldn't give up any of that for the feeling I've got now of having passed. So I guess what I want to tell you today is don't give up. Don't be discouraged. You can do it. We'll help you do it. But there will be better days and worse days. Yesterday was a worse day. It was almost the worst day, I think, that we could have had. And today's a new day. And so we go at it today, and we'll go at it tomorrow, and we'll keep going at it until we get you over the top. And I'm so proud of all of you. I'm proud of the effort that you put in. I'm proud of your desire and willingness to persevere. I know you are too, Megan. It's heartrending to us to see how much you all put into this. And I want you to know that we care very deeply about you and what's happening. We care about these issues deeply, but we believe that we make the biggest difference by getting you out into the world. And so that's why we stay focused on the bar and we don't get into these other things a whole lot. So you want to add anything to that?
That was really well said. You guys you're all amazing. Like every single one of you that I've had the privilege of working with and meeting and talking to or emailing with, like, I'm so blown away. You're all incredible people. And the bar would be so lucky to have you. And that's why we rejoice when you pass, because we're not thinking, oh, good, we snuck someone in. We're thinking that state bar is lucky to have this new attorney, and the ways that you all will impact communities and states and make real differences for people. And I know yesterday was obviously horrifying and unfortunately not surprising, but still no less terrifying to watch. And it's okay if you, like me, I was horribly unproductive yesterday. It's okay. It's okay to have those days. But now we take a deep breath and we know that huge issues are out there and we're going to keep soldiering on alongside you, and also continuing to speak out and for what's important and for what is right and just and for truth. And we know that you guys are absolutely amazing people, and we really care deeply about our jobs and how we can help you become members of the bar. Yeah, hang in there, keep your heads up, keep working, but definitely give yourself grace when it's a really crazy, unprecedented day.
Yeah. And for those of you in California, good luck on your results tomorrow. We'll be anxious to hear those. So hope everybody stays safe and healthy. We'll go back to our regular schedule with everybody. So we will see you then. Thank you, Megan, for being here. Take care, everybody. Have a good week and a good weekend. Bye-bye. Well, I know the events of this week have left many of us feeling really discouraged and just incredibly unhappy and disappointed. But we didn't want to leave you in this podcast on a down note. So we wanted to finish up today with an interview we recorded a couple of weeks ago, right after the Georgia bar results were released. We had a successful student, one of many in our course, who had taken the Georgia bar a number of times before. I think it was 4 times without success. And then he came within 2 points of passing the Georgia bar in February of 2020. Working with us, Chance put together an incredible effort, and he raised his score to 278. In total, that was 64 points from his original score on the Georgia bar exam. And I really wanted to share his story with you. I think it's incredibly inspiring and uplifting. And I thought it might be a little bit of an antidote to what such a tough week this has been. So without any further introduction from me, let's jump into our conversation with a successful October Georgia 2020 bar exam student. Everybody, welcome back to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Takers. And today we have a successful Georgia bar taker. Hi, Chance. How are you?
Doing great.
This must be such an incredible feeling.
It truly is. And I honestly couldn't have done it without your help and your team. So for getting me to this point in my life, my career.
Thanks. That's great. We're going to dig into a little bit of what you did and how your story goes. But this was not an easy road to passing for you, was it?
It was not. I've actually taken it. This was my 5th time, actually. I did 2 commercial bar exam programs for the first 2, and my scores weren't very high. And knowing Georgia, you have to get a certain score on the multiple choice to even advance. The first time I didn't even my essays didn't even get read. So it has been quite a journey these past couple of years.
Wow, that is some accomplishment, and I want to dig into a little bit of that. You also had a point at which you came really close to passing and just fell short, and so I know we want to dig into that a little bit. What has the process been like as you go back over 5 attempts at the exam, and now you're on the other side of the mountain? What does it feel like to you?
Honestly, when I first read the letter notifying me of my results, I swear I read I didn't pass, and I had to do a double take because the score was higher than the score that they tell you to pass, and I was just so relieved. And it's been a trying year too for me to even take the bar exam because I just got married in October, and I was dealing with all that and having to work full time, plan a wedding, and study for the bar exam, and it just all that. I cannot believe I actually was able to do it this final time with all that, not including the pandemic going on. So it really was a sigh of relief and joy, and it was a very emotional day.
Yeah, I bet it was. For those that don't know, the October 2020 Georgia bar exam was really a different test, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely was. And it was different. The time constraint was different because, I've taken it 4 times before that. So it was really, I wasn't really sure how to feel after I took it. I felt confident, but also felt a little time constraint on the essays. I don't know if I performed as well on those because the last time I came so close, I had done really well in the essays and it was multiple choice that had me back. And then this time I felt the opposite just because of a different format.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, what Georgia did is they cut down the number of essays from 4 to 3. They went from 45 minutes to 30 minutes, and then they went to open book. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what the open book feeling was in doing it. And it was an online exam, of course. What was that like to do open book in an online test?
So I would say on the first question, I leaned in onto the open book part. And I got to that close to that 30-minute mark, and I realized that I've already spent too much time. And it was because I was, flipping through the pages, trying to make sure I got it exactly right. But then I remembered what you and Megan all said on your weekly talk Q&As, that you really don't need the books to make the law. And so for those easier sticking points, those last 2 questions, that's what I really focused on, is just putting down what I know and really focus on the analysis more so than looking for the exact wording in the book and the materials.
Yeah, and it really is. It's a rabbit hole, isn't it? It can trap. You think you've got, because the books are there and suddenly you look up and the time is gone. So I'm glad you made that recovery. Of course, it was also strange in that there were not the full 200 multi-state questions, but only 100. What was that like?
That, honestly, I felt like my mind was a little bit fresher answering the multiple choice questions because you didn't spend so long, 3 hours on 100 questions. It was split in half, so an hour and a half. So I just felt really refreshed and it just kind of flew right through them. Honestly, I finished them pretty quickly. I'd used the intuitive method. I read the question, felt like I knew the answer and just moved on and didn't hold back.
Terrific. And of course, the third component of the test was a performance test. And this was being done online in comparison to having a set of printed materials, which you'd had previously. Can you talk a little bit about what difference that was for you?
That one, I always felt like I did pretty strong on the performance test. If you just practice a couple, I feel like you can be really successful on those and get a strong score. I would say the biggest struggle was clicking back and forth because you have it all on one screen. You don't have the materials in front of you. Couldn't copy and paste or anything like that. But overall, I felt like where I thought that would be a struggle, it ended up not being as much of a struggle for me.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be watching who will have to take online tests coming up. And of course, you're in that first wave of people. What advice or thoughts do you have about the online test versus the in-person exam?
I will say that I did feel a little bit more comfortable on the online test in the end, because you're by yourself. You are not with a bunch of other people wondering what they're doing. You're not sitting next to somebody that finishes 10 minutes before you or 10 minutes later than you, wondering if you spent enough time on a question or if you spent too much time on a question. So that part was good. One scary thing for me ended up being, in Georgia, they gave you these strict rules, start timing. And then, so on the first day, as soon as I opened up my exam to start, it messed up. It wouldn't let me take the exam. It was making me get this proctor code. I didn't have that, so I had to get on the phone with Exemplify and ended up starting the exam about 20, 25 minutes past the time that they said that you had to start the exam. So I was a little bit nervous about that, getting some kind of letter down the road or notification that I didn't follow the orders. They ended up never saying anything about it or restricting me, but I did have issues at the very start. The second day was smooth, but that first starting up the essay, I had to download Exemplify, re-download all the exams, and go through that whole process, which it was pretty nerve-wracking way to start a test.
I think you probably just terrified a whole bunch of people. What advice would you have for somebody to avoid that particular trauma? Is there anything you could tell them?
See, the thing is, I had that same issue when I did the mock exam. So the same exact problem happened. And I guess the person that helped me out, this isn't going to help any, this is going to scare them too. The person that helped me out actually didn't do the right thing to prevent that from happening on the real exam. All I could say is if you don't have any issues during the mock exam, similar to what I just had, we have to enter this proctor code. I don't think there's anything really to worry about, because once I got through that part, the second day, everything loaded just perfectly fine. It was just a small issue on my computer. I have a little bit of an older one, and there's no way to avoid it, honestly, if something does go wrong like that. But the biggest piece of advice, if something does go wrong, is don't worry and try not to panic too hard, because the bar examiners, although they want you to start in this exact time frame, they understand there's going to be issues. Not everybody's exam is going to go perfect. So just stay calm.
Yeah.
They know problems will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth noting that the Georgia examiners were pretty understanding, and some jurisdictions were really tense and tight about these restrictions. I thought Georgia actually behaved pretty responsibly and pretty reasonably under the circumstances. So that's good news. Let's back up a little bit, because obviously when you had gotten your February results and you had come within just a couple of points of passing, talk a little bit, if you would, about the emotion at that moment and then thinking you're going to take the exam in July. And of course, it didn't happen in July.
Yeah, so as Jackson mentioned, the February exam, that was the exam I felt most confident about. After I took it, I felt like I knew it. I knew that I killed the essays. I had a really strong feeling going home. And then I got the news. I was 2 points away. I failed by 2 points, and I felt dejected. Didn't know. And that was my fourth time. I was fed up with the whole thing. I really didn't know if I was going to take it again. I actually struggled with myself for a little bit, whether I was going to take it. I signed up to do it. I still, for a little bit, was, just unsure whether I really wanted to do this or if I was going to select a different path for myself, for my career. But I had an understanding boss where I worked. I talked to him. I talked to my wife, and they just kept pushing me to try it again. I tried it again, and I was successful that time, but it was a very hard moment in my life for a few days, just that whole time, actually. And so then I got started studying, and the news that it got pushed back, I was a little bit relieved, because I'd just been doing this back to back. I never took a break in between the exams. And I was like, all right, maybe I just got a little bit more time. Maybe it'll help me out a little bit. And then I got pushed back again from September to October. That extra month was a little bit more of a struggle, just because I was ready to take it then in September. I didn't know how much more studying I really had to do, or how much if I should spend a bunch more time, just keep working through. But I just followed the guidelines, the emails that you sent, and everything went smoothly.
Yeah, it was quite an experience for everybody around the country. I think Georgia students felt it particularly strongly because of the changes with proctoring and the problems they were having and the uncertainty. And then suddenly it's an open book exam, and oh my gosh, so many different changes and dates. As you look back on it and you think, oh my gosh, there was all this stuff that happened, did it seem like having at least a little bit of a breather helped you emotionally recover after the February test?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like I said, I took all these exams back to back after coming out of law school, and that when it got from July to September, it was a moment of a little bit of relief, because it was a quick turnaround for me. You find out at the end of May, I found out I failed the February exam, and a month and a half later, I'm going to have to take another one, and for a fifth time. And it was a tough moment, and definitely the pandemic's an awful thing. But there is some good that came out of it for me, and the exam being postponed and allowing me a little bit more time to gather my thoughts and stay composed. And yeah.
And I think one of the hard things when you come as close as you did to passing, in some ways that's worse than missing by a lot. It feels, oh my gosh, it's so arbitrary at that point. And Georgia doesn't give much in the way of feedback. They just give you a multi-state number and then a total score. So you really don't know where your scores are coming from or how they're working. So it's possible that your essays were really good, or your performance testing, you don't know that information. Ultimately, after you had talked to your wife and your boss and others, I know you had communicated with us, what do you think it was that changed your mindset about being able to go back and do this and push over the top?
The support of family and friends and work, obviously, but also knowing that I was so close and I knew I could do it. It was just a matter of telling myself I can do it. when you see that score and you're 2 points away and you've been working for this moment since you started law school, it's hard to do, but you got to be resilient sometimes and just know that no matter how close you were the last time you took it, you can raise your score much higher. From my second test or my third test to my fourth test, my score jumped. It's like 16 points or so. And in the end, over all the tests, I've raised my score over 30 points.
In watching those score bumps as you were going, I felt like you were climbing a mountain, and we went higher up the mountain and a little bit higher. When you came to me from those first two attempts, you were pretty much in the dumps. And I think you pointed out you weren't even getting, on that first exam, you didn't even get your essay scored. So you really had a huge increase over time. And it felt like you were on a trajectory that you were going to pass. It felt like February should have been the time. You get this weird score back and you go, eh. And then I think from my standpoint, I felt if he doesn't give up, he's going to make it. But this is the real moment when you got to dig deep, isn't it? And you got to say, am I going to stop at the 2-yard line, in effect, or am I going to keep trying to press on? What did it feel like going into the exam itself, the few days before the test in October? What was your mindset at that point?
I was focused. That was definitely, the only time I took off of work was just a couple of days before the exam. Used that time I didn't really hunker down into a desk and do a bunch of questions, do a bunch of essays. I just I woke up in the morning, drank a little coffee, and did an essay or two, a few questions, just to kind of keep my mind fresh, because I've been going at this since May at that point, studying for so long. It can be repetitive and boring, and to the point where you're not even feel like you're studying anymore. You're just reading notes on a piece of paper. So those couple days before the exam, I just used that time to really get good sleep, eat well, and try and stay focused on the long-term goal rather than jam a bunch of information in my brain.
Yeah, absolutely. So you take the test, and now there's the waiting period. And of course, normally we've got a pretty fair idea of when Georgia's going to release results. This time we weren't quite so certain, and we weren't even certain a week ago when they were going to release. And then the announcement came that they're on their way. Tell me about that moment when you found out the results were there and you saw your results.
Yeah, so I literally earlier that day on Monday, I looked up JD preferred jobs like on Glassdoor. I just didn't know if I was even going to pass or when I was going to hear the results. Why not just check out some other jobs and see what's going on? And lo and behold, 30 minutes later, I get an update. There's information in your hub on the Georgia Bar site. I was like, oh no, here we go. And I opened it. And like I said earlier, when I first read it, I thought it said I did not pass. I read it as that because I read it that way so many times before. And then I took that second look and I shouted out from my office at work, and everybody's, what's going on? What's going on? And I was like, I passed the exam. Everybody was so happy for me. And where I work has 2 locations. They called me from the other location, had me on speakerphone. Everybody was congratulating me. And it truly was it was a wholesome moment. And just, there'll never be anything like that again for me, any kind of feeling like that again. And one thing I'll tell you is to make sure for those of you, when you do pass, don't tell your wife it's the best day of your life. Because when you got married, that's the advice one of the attorneys gave me. And I thought it was pretty funny.
I think that's perfectly appropriate. What was your wife's reaction to the bar exam news?
She was happy. She was always supportive during the time while we were, dating and engaged, and then became engaged to keep failing. But it was also rough for her for having to go through this over and over again. Me taking time away from our relationship to have to study. And so it wasn't just me that was suffering from failing over and over again and not feeling great. It was also her. So it was also a big moment of relief for her. And both in our lives, now we can feel like we can move forward and don't have to worry about this again.
Yeah, we talk about getting your life back. I think you're a pretty good example of that. So what's the future hold for you?
Right now, I work at an immigration law firm. I've worked here since basically out of law school, actually. And they've been, very great to me and kept me on during this whole time and let me study when I need to. I love working in the immigration field. My dad's actually an immigrant, and so it's close to home. Being able to help out people that are trying to make a life here in the United States, and I'm going to keep going with this and see where it takes me. And
That's terrific. And we're very proud of you. What advice would you have for people who have taken and failed the exam maybe multiple times and just feel really discouraged? What would you say to them now from your new perspective?
I guess the main piece of advice that I would probably give is just to stay focused and just know that there is a bigger plan for you. Regardless of how you're feeling, it's going to hurt. You can't avoid that. You can't ignore those feelings because this is the biggest part of your life besides other family milestones and stuff like that. But this is the biggest moment for you and the future of your career. So don't feel dejected and just know that you can do it because for me, for example, this was my 5th time and I finally did pass. And it's a great feeling, I promise you. And it's a feeling you'll want to have. And just keep trying. Don't give up. No matter how much you want to, you can make it happen. Follow the way that Jackson teaches you. Follow the study guide. Do the work, and you can pass.
Thanks. That's wisdom. And I think that's a good place to leave it. I'm not sure I can add much more to that. We're very proud of you. We're very excited for you and just delighted that this has happened. Couldn't really happen to a nicer guy. And so
Thank you.
This is very exciting. I know the people in our audience who are watching and listening are going like, whoa, I could do that. I can make that happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to see what your future holds. I'm really delighted that you're doing immigration work. I think of that as being God's legal work these days. And so we're proud that we could have a small hand in that opportunity for you. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it will inspire and encourage so many others. Anything else you want to add before we sign off here?
Just thanks for having me on this podcast. Thank you again for everything that you do, not just for me, but for everybody in your course and that is following your advice. And good luck to everyone out there that's taking bar exam in February and beyond. And I wish you nothing but the best. You will pass one day, I promise.
Perfect. Hey, thanks, Chance. And thank you to all of you in the audience. And we'll see you again next time with another interview. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.